The dislodged entities of the astral and underworld, they are embedding into humans because there was nowhere else left for them to hide. Yeah, baby, let's do it. The collapse of the astral and underworld. This is an update to a previous video that I put up explaining to you about the astral and underworld's collapse. I'm going to give you the bullet point summary of what exactly that means. We're going to look at who these entities are. Should you be afraid? Can you protect yourself? Should you protect yourself? Why are they here? Well, let's start with, why are things as weird as they are right now? That's the question that I want to answer for you. Why are people unreachable? You know what I mean by unreachable? Kind of like those conversations you've had, maybe friends, maybe family, maybe strangers, and you're going, I'm speaking your language. Like whether it's English or German or Dutch or French, like we speak a common language, but you are hearing something else. And what is speaking through you? Okay. That is where we really start hitting the nail on the head. But before I get ahead of myself, let me slow down and backtrack the collapse of the astral and underworld. Okay. Both of those two realms were once surrounded by a membrane of separation. We could also think of that as a veil. And that veil has collapsed. And it collapsed not just recently, but some time ago. And that I'm specifically talking about is the membrane between, or the veil between our realm and then the astral and the underworld. These were two very demonic realms, and these are the beings that are housed in both the astral as well as the underworld. They are parasitic in nature, they're demonic in nature, these are very dark entities. My husband has a lovely name for them, it always makes me smile. He calls them cosmic wildlife. And you know, there's a concept that we've held of fear of darkness. And I call it a concept because that's what it is. When we actually understand what darkness is, that it's just unintegrated light, what darkness is, then we stop empowering darkness and we start empowering light. But that's the shift point that we're at within our evolution right now. So these two realms were once nice and neatly separated, and that suited everyone. It suited the earthlings like you and me in our realm that once was. It suited us because we didn't have to deal with these things all the time. They had a place to go to, right? And for them, it really served them because, number one, it was a hiding spot, and darkness doesn't want to be in the light. It doesn't want to be visible. And I know that this is a big thing because a lot of people have, again, it's a concept, but it's the concept that says darkness mustn't see my light because darkness is attracted to light. Darkness wants to feed on light. No, darkness doesn't feed on light. Darkness feeds on confusion. Darkness cannot digest pure light. It can digest illusion, confusion, desperation, fear. That is its favorite meal. That's what darkness is feeding on. A being of light who's not actualizing their light. A being of light who's dimming down. A being of light who's shying away. That becomes a very easily metabolized meal from the perspective of the entities. So it suited them to remain hidden, number one, because they take great power in being hidden. You know, we had this concept as kids, didn't we? Mom, Dad, there's something hiding under my bed. We've always had this idea looming that there is darkness hiding. That's where their power has been, number one. But number two, it also gave them a passageway between the two worlds. That's what they were doing. They were using a bridge or a passageway between their realm and ours to come in when they needed to feed and then to go out back into the seclusion of hiding and the safety of that dark place. It's much easier for them to be there than here on planet Earth right now. Why would Kerry say such a thing? Because there are so many light workers amplifying their light right now, doing a shadow work that isn't the shadow work that we know, like the pop psychology shadow work. That's very much a head-based endeavor. It's very much about analyzing the shadow. That's not the shadow work that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the shadow work of truly allowing that darkness to be reclaimed as what it is, the disowned power, the disowned anger, the disowned parts of ourselves that we declared to be worthy of shame and blame and were parts of ourselves that were faulty, and we wanted to push them away or give them away or hide them away. The moment we did that, we relegated parts of our own light into shadow states of being. Sorry, it's a new tongue. I'm trying to wear it in. And this is exactly what happened. No, obviously that's a joke. It's not a new tongue. Sometimes you guys take me way too seriously. So this is what we, the light workers, have been doing that's been so dramatically powerful and brought about such monumental change. We have begun, and no, not every single one, because it never needed to be every single one of us, but enough, have embarked on this journey of unification within, wholeness within, which means shining the inner light on the inner darkness. See, it's an inner world. And here's where the magic happens. When we shift the inner world is what projects the external world. We didn't know that. We haven't known that for so long. And that was taken advantage of. The puppet masters who once orchestrated the false matrix, they knew that. They always knew that we were the creators of the false matrix, which is why they fed us ideas that would fuel our shame, fuel our inner war within ourselves, our inner judgment, our inner criticism, etc. Because what you see out there in the world, people criticizing, judging each other, where do you think it comes from? The relationship to themselves. You can't have somebody who's in inner union causing external disharmony, causing external friction and fracturing. It simply isn't possible, because you wouldn't be able to sustain the harmony of unity and then carry out and perpetrate a fragmentation and a separation reality out there. The reality in here determines what we do out there. So we had no idea that we were being puppeteered and that we were being used to orchestrate the creation of the false matrix reality. We held all of our own shame and secrets and darkness separate from ourselves. We wouldn't even confront, we wouldn't even look. But the moment we did, that's when shadow work really began, and that's when we began to dissolve density. Now it was no longer outside of us. And I'm talking here about the personal journey, right? I'm talking about your own personal darkness, meaning your own personal places that you needed to heal, things that you needed to confront about yourself in the form of traumas and illusions and ancestral baggage that was passed down over multiple lifetimes. That was the collective inner darkness that we began to really own and reabsorb into light and dissolve into light. Now, if you understand that, then you understand what it is to be a light worker. That had a massive impact, that inner work, which most light workers had no idea was going to happen. That had a massive impact on the external structure of the false matrix. That's when that membrane of separation that kept the astral and the underworld separate from our world began to corrode and eventually completely collapse. It was also at that point, by the way, that the light workers began to listen to a different instruction. We were all born to a false matrix that instructed us to listen to the commands of the false matrix. So we listened to the news and we obeyed all of those outrage pieces and all of those knee-jerk response horror pieces that we needed to focus on and bring our awareness, our creative awareness to. We were always being used to create that reality that we didn't realize was being seeded to us, that we were obeying that instruction. Suddenly, it's not because that instruction stopped. It's because we were listening to something else. And that something else that we were listening to was the frequency of consciousness that was coming in through the sun and the surrounding cosmic field that we live in. It was like we were breathing in God consciousness again, and that was going right into the cellular makeup, right into the DNA. And then we were beginning to hear the language of the universe spoken into our DNA directly. That's called a DNA upgrade. When this happened, we began to listen less and less and less to that orchestrating false matrix voice. We began to listen to that less. It's kind of like tuning out the news in the background, because you're listening to a higher frequency. And it's a higher frequency that doesn't come in words. It comes in meditation. It comes in stillness. It comes in silence. And it brings about an inner journey of peace, an inner journey of forgiveness, an inner journey of love. Now, we understand what facilitated the collapse of the astral and underworld, but let me just answer a question I know many of you are going to have. You're going to say, but Kerry, whoa, you're wrong, sweetie, because I've been to the astral. I've astral traveled. I don't want to brag or anything, but that's what I was doing. I know, you guys, I was also brought up in that old spirituality that told us to go to the astral world. We didn't know what that was. That was a mimic overlay of 4D. The organic universe is structured in multidimensional layers, and the false matrix is structured in multidimensional layers too. The false matrix mimicked 4D. That was the false matrix. The astral was the false matrix version of the organic universe's 4D realm. We went there every night when we dreamt, by the way. That was the place that we would call that weird dreamscape, where things would fall from the sky, but you could catch them, and suddenly you had the strength of 10 giants, but you were the size of an ant, and all that stuff that didn't make sense. That's because that's how the astral realm is modeled. Or for 4D, the organic 4D doesn't have the rules of time and space that 3D and 5D have. It's a playground that we go to learn how to become more 5D when we're operating in the organic universe. And of course, we've got that hiding spot, which was the 4D astral realm of the false matrix. And yes, there were some beautiful entities that hung out there, but there were a lot of trickster beings. And that all has to collapse, including the very matrix that we are currently having this conversation in. It's collapsing into light, though. It's not collapsing into debris and there's going to be nothing left. It's collapsing into light. This is what we were born for. This is what is happening now. No matter what your eyes see out there, your eyes are going to say, but it's the same old same. It's the same old world, the same old hustle. I've got to get in my car. I've got to go to work. I've got to do all the things I don't want to do. I'm still enslaved. If you are seeing and reading reality as that nothing's changing, then you're not changing. You're not seeing the upgrade within you. And that's something that you really need to tune into to alleviate that frustration that you might be feeling. So we understand all of that began collapsing into our realm. And when that happened, yes, it put a whole lot of those cosmic wildlife creatures and beings into our field. But make no mistake, it also put beings of higher consciousness into our field as well. Now it became a question of where will you focus? Where are you going to tune in? Because now these astral entities, the dense dark ones, they've got nowhere to hide. So guess what they're going to do? Because they're used to and need to live in a dark, almost like living in a cupboard, right? Living in a dark, closed space. They need that. They crave that. So they embedded themselves into people. They embedded themselves into humans. They became the voices that you've been perhaps debating with and speaking to and wondering why that person has changed so much, why they're not responding to love, why the presence of love seems to make them angry, why they say words like love but act out the energy of hate. This is the nature of a trickster being, and many of these beings became embedded into the human beings who were so busy hiding from themselves, so busy living in denial, so busy cloistering themselves in layers upon layers of illusion, so unwilling to really see themselves face the truth of their own inner yearning or their own inner being. They were beings who avoided heart consciousness and opted instead for head consciousness. In other words, they got very linear and stuck in the brain, which, by the way, is a locus of control for the false matrix. Those became prime targets for the dislodged dark entities from the astral and underworld to hook into. And like all of them, they quiet down and then they rear up. That's their nature. They get because they're used to hiding. So they go into hiding and then they rear up, especially when they're in the presence of a lot of light. And that's what's taking place on the planet right now. The light workers are getting lighter, which means that the dark becomes not necessarily darker. Technically, it just becomes more visible. That's what we're seeing taking place when we see the insanity around us and the unreasonability around us. We have been for the longest time steering a reality, collapsing a false matrix. This is what we've been doing. But in this update, I hope that I've brought to you an assurance that this is in the process of dissolving deeper into light. I want to talk to you about something important now. I know it's a big question that so many of you have, and that is, how do I protect myself? How do I ward them off? And you certainly can. There are many techniques. I want to share with you my favorite. Now, I've done, I think, 8 of these healing practices. These are full healing sessions, at least an hour and a half in length, each one of them. I've done 8 separate entity clearing, in-depth classes and calls in my online community. So those are accessible to you if you ever want to join and work at a level of depth and really do this inner work. Yes, it's there. I'll hold your hand. I'll stand by your side. We'll do it together. That's my real work. But I want you also to have the following wisdom. And that is, every time you push against darkness, you empower darkness. You're here to shine, baby, shine. You're here to be the light. You're here to be the love. And when you are, your light leads you. Your light emanates and radiates and infiltrates the collective. And you might say, but isn't that overriding free will? Because I'm now intervening in the reality of the world around me. And I will say to you, that is not an unfairness. That is not you imposing light. That is the nature of light. The nature of light is that it cannot be contained. Darkness can, light cannot. Light will ripple. Also, true light is not so separate from dark as you might imagine. That's the world of the false matrix. It taught us dark, light. Totally separate. And we even operated from this idea that said, banish. Banish the darkness. Call it names, demean it, tell it it's bad. We got kind of childish and didn't even realize that we were doing that. Still to this day, I have people telling me, oh, I kicked that junk to the curb. Darkness is simply light that is disowned, that is unclaimed. And when it's reclaimed, it becomes light. Can I, however, Kerry, reclaim all the darkness of all the world? No, I can only reclaim the darkness that is mine. I can only reclaim the shame, the blame, the personal experiences that have been of density in my world and my ancestral world. This would be called my direct density. I have power over the direct density to expose it to my direct light. And when I do, I become a force field that darkness doesn't particularly want to be around, because when they're around that much integrated light, please hear the difference. Integrated light. This is imperative because you know that concept, we've spoken about it before, false light. That's what false light is. False light is called that because it's the light that determines itself to be separate from dark. Any time that we are breeding separation, we're breeding darkness. False light is a breeding ground for darkness. A lot of the New Age movement and the very airy, fairy spirituality of the past was centered around that notion of darkness is so powerful, it can stain my light, it can detract from my light. So look at how much power we were giving away. When we did that, we were really inadvertently saying, oh, my light is not very powerful at all. And I've got to hide and I've got to banish and I've got to do all of these things. So once again, that journey of reclaiming the true light, which is the integration of the light that is and always was and always will be the infinite light of God in the universe. And then when I embody that light and I allow my density to be in its presence, alchemy transpires, which is the dissolving of that density, not the shaming, not the blaming, not the judging, the dissolving of that density into light. Now I'm becoming a source field, not a force field, a source field of light. And darkness cannot feed on this. Darkness cannot metabolize this. It's too much light. They need a perfect cocktail. Remember, the unconscious light, okay, that they can feed on. The false light, that they can feed on. And that's what they do. That's why they're always around us, because they cannot self-source. We can. So the solution, therefore, is to self-source the light that you are, to bring it in, breathe it in, ripple it by being it. And when that happens, density will dissolve. You will leak into not just your multidimensionality, but into the entirety of the field. That's why darkness is so on edge and so in the fight. It's really in the fight for its own separation. Its separation is the preservation of its being. The moment it stops preserving separation, it becomes integration into light. And of course, then it stops being dark as a separate identity and it starts being light as an harmonious unity, an inclusivity. That was the word I was looking for. So, yes, you can shield and ward off the darkness. Shield, and in so doing, relegate yourself into a very powerless position. I would way rather you focus on the light that you are, and being the light that you are, and integrating the darkness that has been yours. Owning that. That's the real shadow work. And when that happens, it's in that shine that you emanate and that you radiate, that you begin to take up more space in your very own field of multidimensionality. When you disown power, what you're essentially doing is this. I'm going to create a lovely visual for you, and then I'm going to leave you because I've given you enough information for you to kind of really digest and work with here. Here's the final visual. Let's just imagine that your multidimensional field is a mansion with multiple rooms. But you've got the key only to the rooms that are pristine and pretty. There are other rooms that you just don't go into, so it's kind of like you've forgotten that they're even there. You don't live in those rooms. And because you don't live in those rooms, but you are a creative being, those rooms will beckon the beings of darkness. They're going to say, look, there's unoccupied space, and I'm going to go move in. When you begin to radiate your light, you begin to fill up those rooms, which are the unconscious spaces where density and judgment and shame, etc. were held. You're going to begin to expand and ripple your light into all of the rooms of your multidimensional mansion, so to speak. And then there's no more space left for darkness to occupy. And there it is. That, my love, is the potency and the magic that you hold that you didn't even know that you did. When you do, you're not going to run. You're not going to shield. You know why? You're going to realize, what? Why would I shield my light? My light protects me. My light goes ahead of me. Focus on being light, not fighting dark. When you do, that's when you truly become powerful. Otherwise, you're always going to have to stand there with a sword in hand. I truly hope that this reaches a place within you that is ready to receive this level of truth from my heart, all the way to yours. So much love.